Bratty sister had a 2-month affair with my husband, fell pregnant, and then had the audacity to pack my bags and kick me out so she could live with him, with my parents' approval. I, F28, married the love of my life, Wes M32, 3 months ago after being together for 4 years. And now I'm in the process of divorcing him, and my life and family have completely fallen apart. I have no support from my own family, therefore I can only rely on my pals. I thank God for them. Otherwise I'd be a bigger mess than I already am. I have no idea why this happened or what I am supposed to learn from it. All I know is that this is unjust, and I'm not sure what I did to deserve being locked up in such a horrible situation. I have an older sister named Meg F34. Meg and I've always had a good relationship. We never had the opportunity to form a sisterly bond because of our age difference. I wasn't even a teenager when she went to college outside of the state. I wouldn't say we disliked each other, but we now do. But as kids, I don't think we despised each other, or at least I didn't, but we weren't your typical tight best friend-sister combo either. There's no Elsa or Anna going on here. Our parents, too, never pressured us to create relationships. We did things as a family, but she and I had the freedom to be ourselves, which was wonderful. Years later, when I went to college, our relationship improved slightly. I suppose that, because we were both adults, we could relate better to one another. I did not go to the same university as her, and we were not in the same state. However, we continued to talk more than before, so hearing this from her was the worst shock of my life. When I was 24, I met Wes. He was a former student at my college who had come to celebrate. That is where we met, hit it off, and started dating shortly after. By year 2 of our relationship, I had introduced him to my family. He proposed a year ago, and we got married 3 months ago. I won't lie, I had a perfect life. I had a wonderful girlfriend who loves me and a terrific job in an area that I chose for myself. Wes was doing well too. Everything was going great until 3 months ago. Meg, on the other hand, had a more hard personal life. When she was 25, she married a man no one liked. He was clearly not a good fit for her, but no matter what we said, she refused to change her mind. So we just let her be, because that was all we could do. It was far from a happy marriage. He pushed, or rather deceived, her into quitting her job, which she did, making her financially dependent on him. My parents and I frequently asked her whether she was okay with it, and we vowed to help her leave if she wanted to, but she always said no and asked us not to intervene. The breaking point for us, or rather me, came when she said I was out to destroy her marriage since I didn't have anyone of my own. This occurred 5 years ago, before I met Wes. I recognized it was pointless to argue with her, or try to persuade her to see reason. She was acting as if she was blind and chose to be loved, and whatever aid she received was considered as insulting. That was the last time I spoke to her about her whole husband. We had very little interaction for more than 2 years following that, when I was 25 and she was 31. We divorced. I never asked her why, because I didn't want to meddle in the slightest. She tried to talk to me about it, but I always declined. Call me harsh, but I just didn't have the energy or desire to participate in it anymore. I'd been trying to look out for her for years, but in the end I was accused and disgraced, and I had no intention of getting involved again. She was quite furious about it, because I assumed she required assistance at the time, but I was out. This does not indicate that I was purposely cruel or mean to her. We eventually patched things up and spent time together talking and hanging out. She had moved to my state and even told me about her troubles, but I never gave her any advice. She might weep and complain all she wanted, but I wasn't going to say anything about her former husband. She was well aware of this, and it irritated her so much that she would periodically try to rile me up in order to force a response. But I knew better. Dad, for his part, never understood how my sister and I interacted. He used to defend her, arguing that her spouse had damaged her judgment and that I shouldn't hold that against her. According to him, people often behave in this manner when they are in love or have made an unwise decision for themselves. Nobody enjoys confessing a mistake, especially when others have advised them not to do so. I agree with him on this. Nobody enjoys being told, "I told you so." However, accusing someone of being a homewrecker is ugly and repulsive. I wasn't going to put up with it. And it's hilarious that she accused me of being a homewrecker when she was the one who had an affair with my spouse. Anyway, as far as I could tell, Wes and Meg got along well. I didn't spend much time with her, so Wes's contact was minimal. We met whenever we had time, and he was always more sympathetic to her than I was. Throughout my association with him, I had no idea they were involved. Their encounters were minimal. And I never expected to have to worry about anything like this since Wes was not the type of man to cheat. We got married 3 months ago, and everything went great. We had a great wedding, and everyone came. It was amazing. But we decided to postpone our honeymoon so we could go on the Disneyland cruise. We realized we wouldn't have time to take 2 significant vacations. So right after the wedding, we focused on decorating the house. I had moved in with him, the house was in his name, and everything seemed okay for the first few weeks. I just spent a few weeks with him because around a month ago, my beloved sister contacted me crying and said she needed to talk. I didn't have the energy for another one of her sob sessions, so I told Wes, and for once, he agreed. I had no idea what was going to happen. I told her I was too busy, but she insisted we meet. I invited her over, and Wes was also there. She appeared uneasy, and Wes, in retrospect, seemed to want to be anywhere other than that room. She told me she was pregnant, and then started crying. Before I could ask any inquiries, she announced that Wes was the father. It took me a minute to understand what she was saying. I started giggling as I looked at her and Wes, who, to his credit, was just as surprised as I was. I assumed it was a big trick. However, Wes did not laugh, and Meg continued to cry. I asked Wes what was going on, and he whispered, "You can't be pregnant." I questioned what he meant, and Meg interrupted and said they had hooked up a month earlier, and she was positive that Wes was the father. I swear I couldn't think straight for a minute. I just stared at her like a deer in the headlights, and when she didn't say anything else, I looked to Wes. He went into tears, claiming that it was an isolated incident, that it meant nothing, and that he never intended her to become pregnant. As if that was the issue. I told her to go and Wes to do the same. I couldn't look at them any longer and needed time to process what had happened. Meg stared at me as if I'd committed a horrible crime. She had the audacity to insist that she should be the one staying at the house because she was pregnant and I was not. It took every ounce of willpower not to slap her right there. I looked at Wes surprised and he told her to leave, which she did. Wes also left. Though I don't believe they left together at this point. Who knows? If he could get her pregnant, he could. Definitely leave with her. I suppose I sat there for hours, unable to concentrate. My mind was completely numb. I'm not sure where the time went, but I received a few calls from Wes throughout that time. But I had turned off my phone since he was the last person I wanted to speak to. I could not believe he would betray me like this. This was not something I thought he was capable of. I couldn't accept Meg's betrayal since I was still stunned by what my own husband had done. And then I saw a text from her. It effectively stated that, while she apologized for what had occurred, the situation could not be fixed. She was pregnant and knew she was going to keep the child, therefore it was best for the whole family if I moved out so she could stay with Wes, allowing him to care for her and bond with the child once it was born. Her arrogance astonished me. I couldn't believe she had the courage to tell me this after sleeping with my husband. But I realized I couldn't stay with Wes any longer. Despite my numbness, I knew the moment he said it was his child. I couldn't stay with a cheater, let alone in such a problematic family scenario. I realized I had to leave. Wes and her had the last say on whether or not she moved in, but I knew I had to leave. I decided to call my folks and explain what had happened. But before I had a chance, my mother called. She informed me that Meg had spoken to her. And while it wasn't ideal, I had to understand that this was Meg's last chance to become a mother. I asked Mom whether she was serious and recognized the implications of Meg's behavior. Mom paused briefly before responding that I was always welcome to return home with her and Dad. But Meg was 34, and she deserved to have a family after what happened to her ex-husband. I told Mom that Meg could have had a family with hundreds of other males, but she couldn't justify sleeping with my husband. Mom replied that she understood how hurt I was, but I needed to look at the big picture. She said that because Meg became pregnant so quickly, it might be God's desire, and if so, I should create place for his purpose, rather than focused on my own. I cried for the first time when Mom told me this. I couldn't believe Mom would favor Meg over me when I was clearly the one who had been wronged. I ended the call. I knew that there was nothing left for me. My entire family had disappeared in an instant. My family consists of my husband, sister, and parents. I was entirely alone, and there was nothing I could do to remedy this. That's when I decided to leave and cut off all communication with them. They could all eat garbage. This was simply too much for me to handle. It's still too much. It's just been 2 months since I found out, and I wasn't expecting them to pull me into more difficulty. Yet here we are. I can't escape them, unfortunately. Anyway, that night I texted Wes saying I still didn't want to see him for a few days. He called me right back, but I didn't answer. He sent a deluge of texts apologizing and claimed he had no idea what had happened, but I was not in the mood to react. I called my friend Sarah and simply stated what was going on and that I needed a place to stay while I figured it out. She said I may stay for as long as I needed. She brought over some wine and pasta, and we ate as I mourned like I hadn't in years. She stayed with me for 2 days, thank God for kind friends, and helped me pack my possessions. It was much easier to deal with things with her around. There were times when I felt completely numb and couldn't get up, but she took charge and got things in order. When my possessions were packed and loaded into the car, I called Wes and told him he could come home now. He took 20 minutes to arrive, and when he did, he could not meet my sight. He apologized and expressed thanks for the opportunity to meet with me, hoping that, despite the lack of justification, I would forgive him. I didn't say anything, I just handed him the house keys and got in the car. By the time he realized what had happened, I had already left with Sarah. I have not contacted him since. He sent texts, but I did not respond. I filed for divorce immediately, and while he first fought it, he eventually gave up. I stayed with Sarah for 3 weeks before acquiring my own place. It's a small studio, but it's more than plenty for me. According to my lawyer's advice, Wes is the only person who remains unblocked on my phone. I've shut off communication with my parents and sister, and I'd prefer to stay it that way, because I no longer have the strength to deal with their toxic conduct. I expected them to take the hint and leave my life alone. But it appears that this is not the case, as Meg has arrived on my doorstep. I'm not sure how she got my address or what she wanted, but she was there, insistent she needed to talk. I locked the door in her face because I did not want to see or speak with her. But she did not leave. She began beating on my door, and I told her to leave or I'd call the cops, but she refused. She stopped knocking, but did not leave. I found out the hard way. After about 20 minutes of silence, I assumed she had left and gone outside. I got into my car, but I had no idea she was following me in her vehicle. I was on my way to grab coffee, and she stopped me there. She insisted that I speak with her since I owed her anything. I jerked my arm away, telling her that I owed her nothing, and that she was free to go wherever she wished. She said she realized how much I disliked her right now, but as the father of her child, I had a responsibility to fulfill and had already failed to do so. I wasn't sure what she was talking about, and I made it obvious to her that I wasn't her children's aunt. I am not an aunt to my ex-husband's child, so I needed to be kept out of this situation. She also stated that if I had warned her about Wes, she would not be in this predicament, and I would not have had to end my marriage. I had no idea what she was talking about, and I suppose I should have left at that point, but my curiosity took over. When I asked her what was wrong, she burst into tears. She claimed she had no idea Wes would be such a poor spouse, and that I had been living with someone like him for so long. She said that he did not help around the house at all. He offered no emotional support, and it felt as if I was living with a zombie. She had expected that as the pregnancy progressed, he would bond with the baby, if not with her, but she characterized it as worse than being with her former spouse. He didn't do any housekeeping or spend any meaningful time with her. He even said she shouldn't expect him to be involved with the baby. He replied that he was willing to keep her and the child in the house while handling the money, but the house and baby were her responsibility. She claimed she attempted to reclaim it by not preparing his meals or doing his laundry, but he handled his own chores and went to work, leaving her feeling helpless. She went on to say that if she had known he would be like this, she would not have revealed the father's identity and would have raised the child alone. But I had encouraged her to believe that he was a fantastic partner, which is why she dropped the bomb, but now her life was even worse than before. I told her I couldn't believe she had the nerve to blame me after sleeping with my husband, but I wished her luck and told her she could do anything she wanted while I was gone. She insisted that I couldn't leave her in this circumstance, but I was not in the mood to listen, so I left the cafe. I'm composing this from my car because I don't know what to do, how I feel, or who to talk to. This is a massive mess, and I don't think I'll ever get out of it. I just hope she doesn't contact me again, and Wes doesn't find out she met me. I'm scared that if he does, he'll resume texting and calling me, and I don't have the stamina to deal with it. They've opened my eyes to what really happened. I was too shocked to understand Meg's reaction, but now I realize she may have purposely baby-trapped Wes since she thought he was a nice partner, especially after her awful experience with her ex-husband. I'm not excusing Wes, he harmed me beyond repair, but the more I think about it, the more likely it seems. Her entire outburst earlier was about feeling tricked since Wes was not the partner I had projected him to be. But why would this bother her? Why would she say that if I had told her the truth, nothing would have changed? It's horrifying and startling how vicious she can be. I can't believe I was questioning myself after what she said. The confounding thing is that Wes has never been the way she described him. He's always been very hands-on, and her description sounds like a lie. I've never known him to be lazy, so this behavior surprises me. I'm not sure why he's doing this, and I don't want to know. I am still suffering with the betrayal, and it has been exceedingly tough to adjust to this new normal. I don't want more drama at their expense. They may retain the mess they made. I'm out. Update 1: I wasn't out of it. Regardless of how hard I try, I am constantly lured back into their mess. I had no intention of telling Wes about my experience with Meg, and I had no desire to contact her again. I'd left them to their own devices when Wes arrived at my house. I am not sure how they know where I live. I know Sarah hasn't told them, and I haven't brought anyone over to snitch. Maybe they're tracking me at work, or Wes still has access to my whereabouts, which I know isn't possible. It was as if I had encountered a ghost. He was a shell of himself. His cheeks were hollow, and he wore dark rings the size of craters. If I hadn't disliked him so much, I might have rushed over to hug him. If I'm being honest, that was my instinct, but I had to control myself. He indicated that he needed to speak with me one last time and would not disturb me again. I let him in, and he spoke for about a half hour. He apologized repeatedly, saying he was disgusted with himself. He explained that Meg came over one day when I was at work. She was seeking for me, and when he told her that I was not there, she fell into tears. She began by saying that she regretted not having a closer relationship with me and was prepared to do anything to fix it. Wes alleges she asked for his help in making this happen. She was crying a lot, and he said he was comforting her. Thus one thing led to another. When he said that, I lost control of my anger. I told him there was no reason for what he did, and he admitted he made a mistake and had no excuse. He stated that he just wanted to inform me what had transpired. He claimed it was the only time something like that had happened, and he wanted to tell me immediately soon. But Meg convinced him not to. Even after she told us she was pregnant, he insisted she have an abortion because he didn't want her to keep the baby. However, she was adamant about keeping the baby. Wes promised that if I gave him another chance, he would cut off all contact with her and the baby and start over with me. He stated he had been acting like a bad partner on purpose to persuade Meg that they would never be a family, no matter how hard she tried. He said that my parents and Meg were manipulating him into accepting the situation. But he felt something wasn't right. I asked if he planned to marry Meg, and he said he was preparing to kick her out. He had attempted backhanded approaches, but they had failed, so he had to confront the matter and kick her out. He hoped I would forgive him and explained why he wanted to wait for me. I told him there was no way I would ever return to him since I couldn't get over his treachery. I replied that nothing could be worse than his sleeping with my sister. I told him he could forget what had happened and move on, but I was stuck with his family for the rest of my life. There was already too much unavoidable engagement on my part, and I didn't want to complicate matters further. He begged me to reconsider, but I stood fast. I told him I was going through with the divorce no matter what, and there was no point in dragging it out. He appeared heartbroken, which was dreadful. Despite everything, I continue to love him. That's the worst part. I adore him, but I can't ignore what he has done. This is the sad part of it all. Development 2. I regret for disappointed those who anticipated a substantial development. I have cut off all communication with Wes, and the divorce will be finalized in a few weeks. He's kicked Meg out, and she's found a way to blame me for it, but I don't care anymore. My parents attempted to contact me in order to plead Meg's case to Wesley. I am not sure what substance they are on to advise anything like that, so I did not respond. There is no use in talking to those who are so worried about other people's suffering that they don't know what to say. Aside from that, things are usual. I mean, as normal as feasible under the circumstances. There are still days when I break down uncontrollably, but I'm improving. I have friends, a job, and I keep myself occupied, so I don't think I should demand too much from myself right now. I honestly believe the worst has passed, and I know I will have no contact with the baby. I realize it's not the baby's fault, but it's best for me to stay as far away from this calamity as possible.